Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. Thank you for joining us. The FBI is now assisting with a criminal investigation into how Boeing's 737 MAX passenger jets were certified by the FAA. This comes as new reports emerge detailing the final moments of the Lion Air flight that crashed in Indonesia last October, and as a Senate panel gears up for a hearing on aviation safety next week. CBS News transportation correspondent Kris Van Cleave has the latest.
As stall warnings blared, shaking the controls on Lion Air Flight 610, its pilots rushed to identify the source of the problem with their 737 MAX, according to published reports. A sensor malfunction had triggered a new anti-stall system, pushing the nose of the plane down nearly 24 times. Minutes from disaster, the captain asked the first officer to take the controls while he checked the flight manual for a solution. Just before the crash, the first officer is saying, "Allah Akbar, God is great," and praying for a miracle. Anthony Roman is a pilot and flight instructor.
Well, the training was insufficient. It's clear that it was insufficient. Pilots should be reactive to emergencies based on their training. It should be almost automatic.
On that same plane's previous flight the day before, the same malfunction occurred. As those pilots fought for control, Bloomberg reports a third pilot hitching a ride in the jump seat correctly identified the problem and told the crew how to stabilize the plane.
The jump seat pilot can see exactly what action they're taking and has a more diagnostic role. So it's very fortunate that he was present.
Investigators say that crew did not fully report the issues upon landing. Jeff Gazzetti is the recently retired director of accident investigations at FAA.
That same airplane underwent several days of maintenance write-ups with some sort of problem with airspeed, with altitude. So the airplane really should have been taken out of service.
Kris Van Cleave joins us now from Reagan National Airport in Arlington, Virginia. So, Kris, the FBI is assisting in the investigation of the certification of the 737 MAX. What is that investigation looking into?
Well, we know that the FBI will be supporting what's been described as a criminal investigation. We also know that the Department of Transportation Inspector General and the House Transportation Committee are also investigating the certification process or the approval process of the 737 MAX. And based on the fact that both Boeing and FAA employees have been ordered by federal authorities to retain documents relating to the approval process, clearly one of the things they're going to look at here is how did that process work, the relationship between the FAA and Boeing, and likely were there things that perhaps were not represented properly, or sort of some of the questions we have about how did this airplane get into the air with some of the issues that we have now learned about. There is reporting that the anti-stall system, as it was presented to the FAA at one point, ended up being far stronger in how much force it uses to push the nose down. So certainly investigators will want to know if things were represented properly, or if things were not. But we don't have a lot of clarity on if there are targets of the investigation per se. We know that a subpoena was issued to a Boeing employee to retain documents, and we know that obviously there's a growing number of agencies and parties that want to look into this, as there are some real concerns about how a plane with some potential design flaws got approved.
And Kris, one of the issues at hand is how much Boeing was involved in the approval process. Why is their involvement significant, and is it common for manufacturers to be so close to the certification process?
It's a process that is designed to be cozy. In fact, after 9/11, Congress authorized this system that allows the FAA to essentially delegate the certification process, or large amounts of the certification process, to a manufacturer, including self-certifying safety elements of the aircraft. That is in part because the FAA doesn't have the staffing and the manpower to do that all itself. So a cozy relationship in the certification process is by design. The question here now is, was there enough oversight on the part of the FAA, or did Boeing essentially green light a plane where some things maybe should have been flagged. You know, I think there's a legitimate question to ask where we have indications from the Lion Air crash that the MCAS, or that anti-stall system, activated because a single sensor malfunctioned. There are 2 of those sensors on the airplane. Why would if one of them is working and one is not, why would that trigger something as severe as this anti-stall system? That appears to be a single point of failure, and that's something that shouldn't have been certified if in fact that's what played out here.
What about training? In your piece, pilot and flight instructor Anthony Roman said the training pilots received was insufficient, but he was talking about foreign trained pilots. Are authorities in the U.S. looking into additional training for domestic pilots of these jets?
Well, we know that Boeing is in the process of finalizing a software update that is supposed to address concerns coming out of the Lion Air crash. Part of that will be an update to training rules and procedures, so there will be some additional training. We know U.S. pilots were given additional training after the Lion Air crash. Their initial training on the differences between the old 737 and the new MAX was about 56 minutes of online or iPad training. At the time, the belief was the planes were basically the same, so it would have been a bit like you drove a 2005 model of your favorite car and bought the 2020. You don't need to go back to driver's ed to drive the new car. That proved to not be the case here, and so there will be more training. Also, the U.S. carriers are still waiting for simulators. We know American Airlines will have full motion simulators of the MAX by the end of the year. That will really help pilots train because they can simulate what happens if this anti-stall system fails, or what happens if any other system on that airplane fails. Right now, they don't have MAX simulators. They're working off of the previous generation of 737 in the training simulators.
And Kris, what kind of criticism is the FAA facing in the wake of these fatal crashes?
Well, I think the FAA is facing a lot of criticism, and the newly appointed administrator, if he is confirmed, will be coming in to an agency that is facing a firestorm of controversy and to some extent needs to reestablish its reputation as being the gold standard of safety regulators in the aviation world. And right now, I think that's very much in question. You have an aircraft that was certified as safe that appears to have some design issues to it, so much so that the FAA in April is expected to mandate design changes as part of that software upgrade that Boeing is about to push out. So there are some serious questions for the FAA, and there are some serious questions for Boeing. Boeing executives are going to be expected to be called to testify before a Senate committee at a hearing next week.
All right, Kris Van Cleave for us. Kris, thank you.
Sure thing.